Okay, thank you. So we'll get started. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody, depending where in the world you are joining us from today. And welcome to our online information session where we're hoping to take a bit of a deeper dive into the third priority agentic AI tool from our recent global community collaboration, which is the Funding Finder. And this tool aims to identify relevant funding opportunities and support application processes. And this is part of the RDA's Global Agentic AI initiative that we started running at the end of last year. So we have this session now today. I also have a repeat session later on today, and we've run various information sessions throughout the past couple of weeks. They are open to anybody interested to attend. For those who don't know me, my name is Connie Clare, and I'm the RDA's Global Community Development Manager. Trish Radetich is my counterpart in Asia and East Asia and Oceania. Trish is helping with the logistics on this particular call and will share some information with you as we go through in the chat. If you do have any questions, feel free to post them in the chat and we'll get round to those during the Q&A discussion. Just a bit of housekeeping before we begin to let you know that the session is being recorded and the presentations will be published on the RDA web platform. Please do keep yourselves muted just to minimise any background noise. We do like to see your faces in the community if you're willing to keep your camera on during the discussion. Of course, it's recorded if you don't want to, that's also fine. As this is an RDA organised event, we will be adhering to the RDA's Code of Conduct, and I'd just like to remind you to listen openly and respect all the perspectives shared today. We have around 20-25 minutes of presentation. I'll also be sharing a slide with an audio overlay from our collaborators, Microsoft, and then we have time at the end for some discussion and Q&A. If you do have any questions or comments about the RDA's work on AI more generally, you can also contact our Secretary General, Hilary Hanaho, and again, Trish will post her contact details in the chat. So for today's agenda, I'm going to start by giving you some background on the RDA's global community consultation on agentic AI in research that we ran at the end of last year. And I do apologise if you've attended previous information sessions, there will be some repeat information and some overlap, but hopefully that's a refresher for you. And then we'll talk a bit more about the funding finder and the types of features and functionalities that might have, before we then talk about what is an open technology agnostic blueprint and the work that we're hoping to do throughout the next quarter. And then we'll move on to the Q&A before closing remarks and next steps. So for those who might be new to the Research Data Alliance, welcome. We are an international member-based organisation that comprises more than 16,500 members spanning more than 150 different countries. So we are very global, and all of our community members subscribe to this vision, mission and guiding principles that researchers and innovators openly share and reuse data across boundaries, across technologies, disciplines, and countries to address the grand challenges of society. And our community members come together to build the social and technical bridges that enable open sharing and reuse of data. And importantly, at the heart of everything we do at the RDA are these 6 guiding principles of openness, consensus, inclusivity, harmonisation. We are community driven and non-profit and technology neutral. And that means that all of the work that is created by the community is openly available for adoption and reuse by anyone, anywhere in the world. And if you're not yet a member of RDA and would like to join, it is free and open to anybody who subscribes to these 3 things, the vision, mission, and guiding principles. So the RDA's work more formally on artificial intelligence within the Secretariat actually started in September 2024, so almost the end of this year, 2 years ago. And we do have a dedicated web page that shows all of the past projects, activities, and initiatives that we've run. So on this page, you'll see slides, recordings, or links to, as well as reports and white papers from our past events, but also any upcoming events. We also have a section to give our community experts some visibility. So these are the individuals who have contributed to some of the initiatives that we've been running. And you'll also find a section on future work and how to get involved, as well as maybe a few relevant RDA groups that you might be interested in joining. So we started work on agentic AI specifically and how agentic AI supports science and research in November last year. And this was in collaboration with Microsoft, one of our organisational members, as they have a mutual interest in this particular topic. You might have heard of AI agents and agentic AI. It's becoming more commonplace and somewhat of a buzzword. And we appreciate that AI agents could possibly autonomously assist with various tasks throughout the research lifecycle, from data analysis to publication or evaluating research impact. It could speed up research, potentially reduce costs, and also provide access to tools that might be more difficult or otherwise unavailable. So at the end of last year, we ran a survey and had several online information sessions to find out more about how the research community is currently using agentic AI, if they are, what are the needs or challenges that might exist, and where could, or probably more importantly, how could agentic AI have the greatest impact throughout the research lifecycle. And all of the responses and perspectives from the community were drafted in an open report, which I'll share on the next slide. And from April to June this year, we're hoping to work with the community on the development of an open technology agnostic blueprint for one of the priority AI agents, and I'll come on to that shortly. So Trish will post a link to the report in the chat, and this really summarizes 11 conceptual proposed agentic AI tools and the global community priorities for agentic AI in research, so how those tools could be useful. So what is agentic AI? And this is quite a big question. And we actually had 2 information sessions last week to try and discuss this in more detail with the community. It's actually, there is no one single definition. There is definitional instability. We didn't settle on a particular definition, but we recognize that the broader community and you experts in the audience might have different perceptions and understandings of what agentic AI is. But for the purpose of the consultation and the development of this blueprint, we settled on the definition that agentic AI refers to artificial intelligence systems that possess autonomy, goal-directed reasoning, and the ability to act independently with minimal human oversight. So the idea that there can be a series of tasks within a pipeline and there is minimal human intervention. And this is in contrast to traditional AI models we might be more familiar with, ChatGPTs or Claude's LLMs, for example, that might respond directly to prompts. So what did we do in the consultation? Well, we ran these 4 online information sessions where we had international speakers. We had a 15-minute survey open for 1 month. We received 83 responses from 25 countries. The largest group of respondents were researchers and scientists, of which the vast majority, around 90%, had used artificial intelligence or machine learning tools before. Over half had not heard of or specifically used agentic AI systems. And in this survey, we evaluated these 11 proposed agentic AI tools, and these tools were actually identified as potentially useful throughout a previous engagement that Microsoft undertook with more than 50 universities within the UK. And you can see how they're ranked on the right-hand side of the screen. And this was using a weighted scoring system. So we asked respondents, we gave them a brief description of the features and functionalities of each of these tools. And we asked respondents to score them based on their usefulness, whether they were very useful to not useful at all. And you can see how that resulted. So the top 3 priority tools, in first place was the literature librarian, followed by the data director, and then in third place, the funding finder. And you can see at the bottom here, the least prioritized tools were the collaboration catalyst, publication preparer, and the ethics reviewer. And I'm sure you might have your own ideas for why these are in this particular order. So this is a bit of a busy slide, and it is actually in the report if you'd like to have another look. But this shows the research life cycle in the centre, from the formulation of hypotheses and new research questions through to reporting on research output and impact. And you can see how those 11 tools actually slot around the research life cycle. So the most highest priority tool, the literature librarian, could help with natural language literature searching and integrate with library subscriptions or contracts to access articles, open access and behind paywalls. In second place, and we actually looked at this tool earlier on in the week, the data director could possibly help with automatic metadata creation to help ensuring compliance with fair and fair squared principles, which are for AI specifically, could help with assigning DOIs for data sets and also provide guidance on where data could be stored or published or archived to be compliant. And then in third place, the funding finder could scan scattered or niche funding databases to match calls with ideas, possibly provide templates for applications to ensure guidelines are met with funders, and could suggest improvements based on previous successful applications, so improving applications. And that is, of course, the tool that we are focused on during this session today. So here on this slide, I've just shared again those three primary, should I say, features and functionalities of the funding finder. And as you can see from that donut chart, I think around 70% of respondents found this tool would be useful, either very useful or somewhat useful. Just under 20% found it not useful, and around 7% were unsure, possibly because they are not familiar with the concept of agentic AI, or they didn't know whether they thought the funding finder would be of use. So in terms of the needs and features and what the respondents actually said during the survey and in the report, the most cited benefit of all was the fact that this tool could scan scattered and niche funding databases to match opportunities with research ideas. They said that this would possibly save time and really help researchers be able to navigate the ever-growing complexity of the funding landscape. There was also great value in the generation of application templates and checking compliance with funder guidelines. A need that was also suggested was that it would be useful to have some priorities listed and also receive notifications about new funding opportunities and have customizable search criteria, so to be able to search by budget type or timing of the funding opportunity. Some also said it would be good to identify smaller grants with very bespoke requirements and to also be able to match organisational capabilities to funder and tender guidelines, as well as being able to assist with proposal writing, identify partners or collaborators for grants and proposals, and to highlight similar previously funded projects. So if you also have ideas for things that you would like or features that you would like to see in such a tool, please do share them. You can write them in the chat and we can also discuss those afterwards. So of course the needs and features were also balanced with challenges and complexities. Some respondents questioned the necessity of agentic AI for this kind of tool and said that well-structured databases can actually suffice at a lower cost. We also have to bear in mind that AI is not always correct and it can hallucinate. So where there were some concerns about errors and that these would require a human in the loop and constant verification. And of course, funding also has some unwritten norms and rules, and AI has this inability to handle that nuance that humans obviously can understand. In terms of being able to suggest improvements based on previous successful applications, there were some concerns about from respondents that this might reinforce existing buzzwords and it could repeat the same patterns and formulas without actually having any substance or impact, which would stifle innovation. There was also this idea that this kind of tool could create potential for gaming the system. So those applications that do lack substance could maybe sound more rigorous, more innovative and impactful than they actually are. It could maybe inflate track record and impact claims, but also make funding applications much easier and quicker to produce, which could actually create a higher volume of applications, which could flood the system and overwhelm funders and reviewers. There was also the challenge that funding guidelines sometimes change during open calls and that AI might not be able to access this. And some said that funding is very much about relationships and who people know rather than being process based. So, again, if you can think of other challenges and complexities, we are very happy for you to share those with us too. So, for the final part of the presentation, I'm going to move on to what is an open technology agnostic blueprint. From the RDA's perspective, open means that, along with our guiding principles, anybody is able to contribute to the development of this work, and the product as a blueprint is freely open and accessible to anybody, anywhere in the world. It's transparently developed and it's community governed. Technology agnostic is more about this is what the tool does and how it behaves without prescribing to a specific technology, such as an AI model, a cloud provider, or infrastructure. And the blueprint, which we'll go on to in a little bit more detail, is a community developed specification or framework that anybody should be able to implement, whether it's a university, a national research infrastructure, or a commercial vendor. And of course, the blueprint has to have a clear problem definition and a user community. So that also needs to be included. So funding finder blueprint considerations. What are the things that, based on the information I've shared today, we really need to think about considering during the blueprint development phase? And you'll probably think of more yourselves. But funder guideline accuracy. So how does the tool handle the problem that guidelines often change during open calls? That's something that we need to think about. A one-size-fits-all approach won't be sufficient in terms of scope and coverage if we want to find those smaller bespoke funding opportunities. How are we going to create a tool that can find everything based on searches and keywords? In terms of matching organisations to funding opportunities, this actually moves beyond keywords, and the tool would need to know about organisational track records, eligibility, and whether the organisation is capable of doing that particular work. So this requires very careful design. In terms of trusting AI as a black box model, not that we would want to create it like that, but the idea that also AI can hallucinate is a problem. So we need to think, especially in the high stakes of funding applications, that we would need quality control mechanisms and human in the loop checkpoints to make sure that the outputs are accurate. And coming back to that idea of gaming the system and equity risk, we need to think about how historical application data might be used to improve future or current applications so that it doesn't reproduce the same formulas and reinforce existing buzzwords. And finally, on transparency and explainability, we'd like to create a blueprint for models that users can understand and be able to challenge AI suggestions. So finally, before I'm at the penultimate slide now, the components of a blueprint. What does the blueprint need to contain? So it has to have a functional specification. So this is the definition of those core capabilities, whether it be scanning funding databases, checking compliance with funding requirements, creating application templates, or suggesting improvements based on previous successful applications. We also need to think about the input, output data and standards. So what kind of formats and metadata schemas might be used so that the tool can actually access funding databases, draw organisational profiles and assess eligibility. It needs to include evaluation criteria for accuracy, such as quality control and human in the loop checkpoints. It would also encompass a reference architecture, so a high-level technology map or diagram that shows the data flow and the interactions between the various different components. It may also include a governance model for sustainability, so it will include how a potential tool or the blueprint would be maintained, how it would be scaled, how it would be updated to ensure financial, technical and community governance for sustainability. As well as implementation guidance, so this might be practical notes for adopters for how they could actually build and implement such a tool using the blueprint, and any known risks or limitations, open questions, and also competition, how to avoid gaming the system, for example, and the equity risk that I mentioned, as well as others that we might come across along the way. So for the next quarter, from April to June, when we start working on a particular blueprint, and we have two tools in mind, both the data director and the funding finder, We will be working with Microsoft, and we are very grateful to have two software engineers that want to be involved and collaborate with the community. And just to emphasize, they are very aware that this is going to be an open and technology agnostic blueprint that can be used by various different vendors and organisations. So thank you to George Earle and to Benjamin Wright-Jones. And on the next slide, Ben has actually created a slide with an audio overlay that I'm going to play for you, and it's quite short, around 4 minutes. But please do turn the volume up on your own machine because I think it might be a bit faint. So I'm going to do the same as well on this. So I'll press.
When building an architectural blueprint for a cloud solution, it is crucial to keep the business outcomes and end-user experience front and center. However, there are times when not all business outcomes are always known, and there are times when horizontal platform capabilities are required before proceeding to use case considerations. Architecture blueprints should provide a clear, scalable, and secure design that meets both business and technical requirements without being tied to any specific vendor. The process typically starts with understanding the business context. This means identifying the problems we are trying to solve, the users involved, and the expected outcomes. At this stage, we discuss functional requirements, what the system needs to do, and non-functional requirements, such as performance, scalability, security, and availability. Next, we move into defining the high-level architecture. Here, we break the system into core components. For example, we might identify layers such as presentation, application logic, data, AI, and integration. The key is to think in terms of capabilities rather than specific services. For instance, compute, storage, networking, and identity management, instead of naming particular products. Once the high-level view is clear, we can focus on designing the core components in more detail. This includes deciding how services communicate, whether through APIs, messaging, or event-driven patterns. We also define how data flows through the system, where it is stored, and how it is accessed. And it is important to understand geographic and regional policies can inform data usage, retention, and security. Security should be embedded into every layer of the architecture, not treated as an afterthought. The next step is designing for scalability and resilience. We ensure the system can handle varying levels of demand by using techniques such as elastic scalability, horizontal scaling, load balancing, and fault isolation. We also plan for failure, designing components so that if one part fails, the system can continue to operate or recover quickly across geographic boundaries if needed. We then consider operational aspects such as site engineering, reliability, and observability. A good cloud architecture includes visibility into system health and performance, enabling teams to detect and resolve issues quickly. Automation is also key here, using infrastructure as code and automated deployment pipelines to ensure consistency and repeatability. Another important step is cost and efficiency planning. Even in a vendor-agnostic design, we think about how resources are consumed and how to optimize usage. This might include designing for elasticity, choosing appropriate storage tiers, or minimizing unnecessary data transfer. Finally, we bring everything together into a visual blueprint and documentation. This typically includes different viewpoints, data flow diagrams, and written explanations of design decisions. The blueprint should be clear enough that different stakeholders, from engineers to business leaders, can understand how the system works and why it was designed that way. Building a cloud architecture blueprint is an iterative and interactive process. It starts with understanding requirements, moves through structured design and validation, and results in a flexible, secure, and scalable solution that can be implemented across different cloud providers. The key is to focus on principles and patterns rather than specific technologies, ensuring the architecture remains durable and adaptable.
Okay, so that was the last slide from the presentation, so I'm going to stop sharing. Thank you for your attention so far. Do you have any questions about the work that's been presented? Anything that springs to mind?